Daytona Beach International Airport is undergoing a major renovation both inside the terminal and on the taxiway. On this episode of Volusia Magazine, how your hometown airport is enhancing the air travel experience and the economic impact it has on our region. That's next on Volusia Magazine. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Volusia Magazine. I'm Joanne Magley, the Community Information Director, and today my guest is Jay Cassens. He is the Business Development Director for Daytona Beach International Airport. Hi Jay, thanks for being here.
Hi Joanne.
So the airport is undergoing a major renovation, both on the outside of the airport and on the inside. But before we get into those details, I think it's important to explain a little bit about how the airport operates and the funding mechanism.
So we generate our funding from parking revenues, from concessions at the airport, rental fees for the airlines, the food and gift shop, PFC, which is passenger facility charges, CFC, which is a customer facility charge that's on your rental car ticket. We use all of those funds and our property revenue, of course, as well. We use all of those funds to pay for projects at the airport. We don't use any ad valorem tax dollars or taxpayer money to operate the airport.
And I think that's the key point, is that you are, while you're a service of Volusia County government, you operate independently, and as you mentioned, you operate just on the funds that you can, your revenue that you bring in.
Yes, we are an enterprise fund of the county. So the revenues that we make don't go to the county, and vice versa. We don't take any of the county revenues to operate the airport.
All right, let's get into the renovations now. Let's talk first about the taxiway project. This was a 2-year project, or is a 2-year project. Where are we at in the project, in the phase of the project, and what will the end result be?
So this is about a $37 million project. It began last spring, so we're about halfway through it now. It's going to go all the way into 2020, and we are rehabilitating all of the main taxiway November that is adjacent to the main air carrier runway, the main runway that the planes take off on. So not only is it the full taxiway, but all the connectors as well. Some of them are being changed, some of the geometry to make it safer. We're also redoing the stormwater system for the taxiways. We're also putting in LED lighting and doing, obviously, it's a complete overlay, so all new pavement for all those. And every 10, 15, 20 years, you have to rehabilitate all of your pavement around the airport, from the ramp to the taxiways to the runways. It's part of the ongoing process to upkeep the airport and make sure that it remains safe and viable.
And you mentioned it was roughly $37 million project, something like that. But that funding, most of that's funded by the federal government, is that correct?
90% is funded by the FAA through the Airport Improvement Project, AIP program. The AIP program is a trust fund that generates its revenue from various fees and taxes on tickets and fuel purchases, and then it goes into this pot of money, and then it's divvied out to airports and airport projects based on the size of airports. So the larger airports, they'll get more money set aside for them. The smaller airports get a certain percentage. And then also to 5% of this, so that's 90% is funded by the AIP program. The other 5% is funded by the Florida Department of Transportation, and the other 5% is funded locally by the airport.
So 90% of funding from other sources, is that typical for airport projects of this magnitude to have that much of grant funding involved?
It gets a little complicated when you're a larger airport because you give some of that money back. It's a formula that if you charge a certain amount for PFC, which is a passenger facility charge, you don't get in as much from the AIP program. But for airports our size, that 90% is very typical.
Okay, but I'm sure it's a big, you need that in order to be able to maintain the airport to the status that it has to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that comes from user fees, and it doesn't come, it's not like a general fund of the federal government. It comes from the people who are using the system, the people who are using the airport. That's where that money is generated from.
So throughout this project, there had been stages where you would have to change how the airplanes would land or take off, and it would change the flight patterns around the community, and some people would notice because now they have planes maybe flying additional traffic that they didn't have before. Going forward, are there more of those changes ahead that people can expect throughout the rest of this project?
So the project itself is rehabilitating the taxiway, which is over 10,000 feet. And as you progress and get close to the runway, you have to close down the runway because it's not safe for aircraft to land anymore. And you're completely rehabilitating, so you're rebuilding this taxiway pavement that is right up against the runway. So when you do that, you cannot safely land aircraft. Mm-hmm. So you have to move to our other air carrier runway, which runs north and south. And that will change the flight patterns in the area when we switch over to the other runway. And that happens periodically, just depending on the stage of the project that we're in. We have occasional night closures right now, but we'll get back into some day closures for a couple weeks near the end of 2019.
All right, let's now go inside the airport, the terminal renovation project. It's about a $14 million project. And while folks may see cosmetic changes because it's a large renovation, there is a lot more to this that's happening as far as a better customer experience. So talk about what this renovation project entails.
It's not only the cosmetics. The airport hasn't been updated in nearly 26 years since it was originally built. So the cosmetics are in need of an update, but it's also behind the scenes infrastructure. The elevators and escalators are going to be replaced. We're also switching to a common use system for some of our gates and ticket counters. When you switch to when you implement a common use system at an airport, that allows airlines to come into the market without as much infrastructure and upfront costs and overhead, because they're able to just come in and log into a common system instead of putting their own custom system in there. It's already in place. It makes it very easy for them, and it's very, very cost effective for airlines. So it's not just about improving the aesthetics of the airport, but it's also about proving our ability to attract and recruit airlines.
So this common system is really all about technology, an upgrade in technology that better serves the airlines that currently are there, or like you said, helpful for new airlines that might come in.
It's the trend in the airport industry over the last 5-10 years that that airports are switching. They're transitioning to this common use system so they can move airlines around, and airlines can come in quickly, set up, and not have to install custom equipment. So it's technology for the airlines, and then there's also a technology piece for the customers as well, which is charging stations, new LED lighting, new video boards, all new technology, bringing us up to current standards.
So what is the time frame for this project? It's underway, and how long is it expected to last?
It started in early June, and it'll run for a year and a half. So hopefully by the end of 2020, we'll be wrapping it up.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about how the airport acts as a really big economic engine for the whole region. So we'll be back in just a minute.
The Atlantic hurricane season begins June 1st and continues through November 30th. Be prepared and take time to develop your emergency plans. Stock a 14-day supply of non-perishable food, water, and medical items for your family. Identify special needs for you and your loved ones. Discuss and create an evacuation plan. Remember, shelter should only be used as a last resort. For more information, visit volusia.org/emergency.
They said I couldn't dream. Called me a piece of trash and swore that's all I'd ever be. Said a bottle couldn't see the ocean. Give up. Go back to the dumpster. But I didn't listen. I made my way. And now, I am what I've always wanted to be.
After recent heavy rains, mosquitoes are on the move. Did you know that if a container can retain water, a mosquito can lay eggs in it? A small amount of water can lead to big problems. Take a walk around your property and tip and toss any standing water. Be a buzzkill. Put a stop to mosquitoes. Stay connected with the latest Volusia County news, events, and updates on our social media channels. Like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Catch up with previous stories on YouTube, or just head over to our website, volusia.org.
Welcome back. I'm joined in the studio today with Jay Cassens. He is the Business Development Director for Daytona Beach International Airport. And before the break, we were talking about all of the renovations that are going on at the airport. And it leads to now this question I'm going to ask you about economic impact. So the Florida Department of Transportation recently published its 2019 economic impact study, and it shows that Daytona Beach International Airport generates $2.1 billion in economic impact, and that's each year, right? So that's a really big number. How did FDOT reach that figure?
So when the Florida Department of Transportation does an economic impact study, they're looking at the direct effects of the airport itself and the revenues that we generate at the airport. And then they look at the indirect effects. So it's going to be visitor spending throughout the community, and then they look at induced impacts. So that goes beyond direct or indirect spending throughout the economy. It looks at, for instance, you've got a customer who comes in and rents a car at the airport, and they spend $100 on this car rental. That's a direct impact. And then they go out in the community and they get a hotel room and they buy dinner for their family and spend money in the community. That's indirect effect. And then that money that they use to go to a restaurant or stay at a hotel, then the hotel uses that revenue, and then it goes to pay employees, and it goes to buy more merchandise, more food product. That's induced. So the FDOT looks at this entire ripple effect of money that originates at the airport. It also looks at payroll that originates at the airport. So they look at our fixed base operators that service corporate aircraft. They look at flight training, the airfield and how it supports Embry-Riddle, other flight training schools, the payroll that's associated with it, and then how that payroll is then spread out throughout the community, spent in the community through rent and home purchases and going to the grocery store. All of that money originates at the airport. So they look at all of that effect and they come up with this $2.1 billion. And another thing to mention about the FDOT study is that it only looked at aviation-related impacts. So it didn't actually account for our other 4 hotels or 2 restaurants or any of the other non-aeronautical revenue that we generate at the airport. It only looked at the airfield, aviation, and support that the airport provides.
And I think this study really says a lot, because most people think of our airport, and we are fortunate to have an airport in Volusia County for fast, friendly, stress-free travel, but that's just one component. This airport, as you just explained, creates an incredible ripple effect throughout the community when it comes to the economy.
It's not just about air service. That's our primary function, is to serve the traveling public. But the airport does so much more, and is so valuable to the community through the economy that extends far beyond the air service. Like I mentioned before, the flight schools and all the flight support and corporate aircraft and international travel that doesn't necessarily occur at the main terminal, but occurs corporately and on the general aviation side. And just think about if we were to not have an airport, and like what the impact that would have on the community, and it would be far beyond the $2.1 billion. So it's a very, very important asset to the community.
As the business development director, you are constantly working with current airlines, future potential airlines, to increase service here at Daytona Beach International Airport, possibly get new destinations. So earlier this year, you welcomed Sunwing, and we have the model plane here on the desk. That is service from Toronto to Daytona Beach. Talk about how that relationship developed with the airline and their eventual determination that this was a market for them.
Yeah, so we started this service in January, and it's seasonal. It's always been planned as seasonal service. We're happy to have them back this fall. They just announced that they're going to be coming back in November and running all the way through the end of May again. So we're really excited to have them back in our international service to Toronto. For Sunwing in particular, the community and the community growth is really what sold them on bringing this air service. This came about more organically. They came here for a site visit with us, and they visited the community, spent several days in the community, and just went to restaurants and hotels and just asked people where they're from. And that's kind of how they developed this idea to come to Daytona Beach. Was they saw all of the crane. They call it the crane effect. They see all of the development and building going on. They see the residential, the commercial growth in the area, and all the potential that Volusia County has. And that's what they wanted to be a part of, and that's why they decided to come here. So without that development and growth, especially on the business side and in the tourism, Sunwing wouldn't necessarily be interested in us. So development's very important for air service.
But they also have the data as well that shows there's a large number of people that are already coming here from the Toronto area.
Absolutely. That was another part of it, was looking at information from the Convention Visitors Bureau, and Toronto is their #1 destination, looking at hotel data, where passengers are coming from before Sunwing got here, and then also looking at secondary homeowner information and seeing where people that have secondary homes, where they're based. Mm-hmm. Are they based in New York? Are they based in Canada and Toronto? There was a lot of those as well. So there was a lot of different factors, and also too where our passengers are currently traveling out of Daytona Beach to go to Toronto through Atlanta or through Charlotte. And Toronto is our #1 international destination for air travel on our existing airlines, which was Delta and American.
Well, so let's talk a little bit more about Delta and American. Those are your 2 main carriers for daily service. Delta with nonstop service to Atlanta, and then from there, anywhere folks want to go. And with American, it's to Charlotte and then anywhere else. And Delta is coming up on this year, its 40th anniversary, serving Daytona Beach. So talk about those two airlines and the importance of that service with our airport.
So American and Delta are the two largest airlines in the world. And we're so lucky and fortunate to have a 50-minute flight to the world's global hub, which is Atlanta. You can get anywhere pretty much in the world from Atlanta. So we're so lucky and fortunate. And then, they've been here for over 40 years. So they're a huge part of what we do, of what we've done over the last 40 years. It's really been because of Delta. And now with American Airlines, they have really started to expand, almost getting to the Delta level in Daytona Beach. Their passenger traffic is up 20% this year. They continue to add flights every single year. They're up to 5-6 flights now, sometimes on the weekends. They just added the LaGuardia service in May, and hopefully that service, it's scheduled to end at the end of August. We're hoping that service comes back either in the same form or more days of the week in 2020.
And that service is actually nonstop from Daytona to New York, which is a high demand for folks. We've seen that there is that demand for that nonstop to that destination.
Absolutely. There's a ready-made market there for American Airlines, and it just made sense for them to give this a try seasonally to LaGuardia, and I'm hopeful that it will be back in 2020.
So when folks are talking about planning their trips and they're looking at the budget, their personal travel budgets, there is some advice that you have for you have the diehard folks that will travel out of Daytona Beach International Airport, and then you have people that will choose to drive a little further in order to save some money on their tickets. We've had these conversations a lot to where you can show that tickets prices can be very competitive flying out of Daytona if you're not booking at the last minute.
Yeah, that's probably the number one takeaway, is that don't book at the last minute and book ahead, and try to be flexible with your days. Surprisingly enough, weekend travel is often the best time to travel, especially out of Daytona Beach, because there's just not that business component in there on the weekends, so you get a better deal. Book ahead of time and think about all of the costs of what it takes to go to another airport, and parking and the time, and the stress factor and the lines. Think about, is that really worth it? Because by the time you go through all of that, you could already be in Atlanta.
Yeah, we've done that comparison before.
Just think about that. So just think about the big picture, the whole thing, and make sure you book ahead of time and try not to wait till the last minute.
There is a misconception among some people in the community that what the airport charges the carriers has some sort of correlation to what the final ticket price for the passengers comes out to be. And you want to dispel that myth.
They're completely separate of each other. The airline is going to charge an airfare that the market will sustain, regardless of what the airport costs. If they're high, if they're low, the airfare it doesn't impact the airfare. That's independent. It's part of the factor when you look at the airline's profitability of a route, but it does not impact what they charge. They're looking at demand and how full the aircraft is, and airfares and other nearby airports. They raise and lower their airfares based on the demand, and they try to equal supply and demand. They're always trying to balance supply and demand. So the cost part of it, the airport cost, is completely separate. And Daytona Beach is actually one of the lowest cost airports in the state of Florida. We barely have touched our rates since the late 90s. So that these two things are completely independent of each other. When it comes to the profitability of a route and looking at how successful it is, they do look at the cost, but when they're setting the airfare, nothing to do with it. It's about supply and demand.
And really the bottom line point of this conversation with air travel is that we like to get the message out for people that have not, maybe aren't used to flying in and out of Daytona Beach International Airport to, like you said, look before you book. You will have a great experience in travel, unlike you would have at other airports that are maybe an hour and a half away. And you like to say that your vacation starts here, whether you're landing in Daytona Beach or whether you're flying out of Daytona Beach.
Exactly. I think that works well because when you have gone, everyone's gone to a big city airport before, and you just want to get it over with. You just want to get it done. And you're really not on vacation, or you're not really home until you're out of there.
You're fighting traffic,
Yeah.
You're waiting in long lines to get through
Exactly.
security, and you just don't have that experience at Daytona Beach.
At Daytona Beach, you're like, once you get to there, you're like, I'm ready to go. I'm on vacation. Or you're just starting your vacation when you're landing. It's just a completely different experience. We offer something that not everyone that not all airports have. It's a VIP experience.
Great customer service as well.
Yeah, that everyone is so nice at the airport, and they really love their job, love being there. And I think once you come and try it for the first time, you'll be spoiled, and you never want to go anywhere else because you just fall in love with the place. We have so many loyal fans that truly love the airport. And that's really what helps us sustain and also build air service, is those loyal customers who will not go anywhere else. Because every time you travel to another airport and you fly out of another airport, that's a vote for more air service at that airport, not our airport. So think about that.
But one last thing before we go, congratulations on your recent award, Airport Leader 2019. Tell us about that award.
So we recently won this award at a conference for most new destinations in 2019. For small airports, they have different categories. They have large, they have medium, and they have small category of airports. We won for small, most new routes by a small airport in the last 12 months. So that's a big deal for us. So we're really proud of that, and we'll continue to try to build on that and bring more air service next year and more new destinations.
All right. Well, Jay Cassens, Business Development Director for Daytona Beach International Airport, thank you so much, as always, for providing the great information today.
Thank you.
And that does it for this edition of Volusia Magazine. We hope you'll join us again next week at the same time. Have a great day.